Patrick, and this is his setup. He's got a little kegel system here. We're sort of introducing ourselves, so this is your first look at everything. What are you doing today, Patrick?
We are brewing an I.P.A. today. This is System's maiden voyage. Brew kettle here, we are passivating it right now.
Why do you do that?
You do that because I drilled and cut into this steel, and if you don't passivate, it can lead to a lot of leaching into your boil and into your mash. So properly passivate with citric acid. You can use nitric acid too, but citric acid is a lot better. It's environmentally safe, and you don't need to use gloves or have a diploma. So it's perfect.
Tell us about your past. Why are you in Pro-Am Brewing?
Well, I guess I went to school for 2 years for professional brewing. Worked at Muddy Creek, internship, and then eventually into brewing. But after Muddy Creek fell to a fire, I saved a few kegs here and cut them open and made a new system. So hopefully we can raise some beer from the ashes.
No, that's nice. That's nice. All right.
We finished passivating all the vessels. We are now heating up our water for our mash. We'll go from here to here, and then we'll add grain and let it sit for about an hour, and we'll start heating up all of our sparge water.
And how many beers are you in?
Just one now.
Just one. We're early in the day.
I usually wait till mash to really start.
I've heard that professional brewers never actually drink while they brew.
Yeah, that's right. It's totally true. Believe everything you hear.
All right. So, yeah, this, I mean, most of you who are watching this probably are fully aware of this, but this is a kegel system. Your kettles are kegs, and Patrick went and used a grinder. Normally you'd use a plasma torch, but Patrick loves his craft. So he used a grinder to cut out the tops, and they drilled some holes for the ferrules, and there you go.
If you're going to use a grinder, fair warning, I would just get an actual diamond blade wheel and not just use the cutting wheels, that are generic. It can be done, but it's a lot easier with the actual diamond bladed cutting wheel.
So you're saying it was a labor of love?
It definitely was. So definitely.
All right, so we're gonna heat this up to mash temp, and then we'll mash in, and we'll join you again when we mash in. All right.
All right. Mash it in.
What do you got in here?
This is our 2-row.
It's the 2-row.
What did I add in before Vienna?
Vienna and Crystal.
There you go. So we added our specialty grains in. This is all 2-row now. We'll add it in and make sure it's good and mixed so we don't get clumps. There we go. What was your thickness on this 1.25?
1.5.
Okay.
What's that about, Patrick? Tell us about that.
So your mash thickness is quart per pound. So we have 1.5, you said?
Mm-hmm.
So we have 1.5 quarts per pound on this one. You always want to be careful with your thickness, just because if you have a large grain bill, you're going to wind up with a really thick mash if you go too low. But then again, you don't want too thin, because they can overheat your grain and you'll be off on temperature. And we are about perfect on here, man. Look at that.
Yeah, that's good.
Right about 150 where we want it.
Yep. All right.
Beautiful. Now I do have a lid for this guy.
Tell us about your career at Muddy Creek.
Well, I started out as just interning, which was a lot of fun.
Best internship ever.
It was so great.
So organized. So buttoned down.
Yeah, had it all figured out.
What do you want me to do today?
Do you like drinking beer? I do.
Hey, Patrick's first gig as an intern was to go and serve beer at a roller derby. That wasn't bad.
That was actually good. That was a lot of fun. That and just jumping right into like events and stuff was pretty cool. So
what was your favorite beer you brewed?
Well, I mean, I gotta say, seeing other people was probably my favorite to brew. It was probably the most unique. and it was actually the first one I did on my own. So it's the very first one that I did. It was just me in the brew house and, you know, doing the thing. So
Tell us about what you brewed on.
we brewed on a Herm system, 10 barrel. Had one singular pump, and we did sparge or batch sparging. So that was, and it was actually more efficient than I thought it was. I was always a fly sparge person before, but after batch sparging on a larger system, I actually like batch sparging a little bit more. I think you get more efficiency out of it. So, but yeah, it was just we'd circulate, you know, so we'd get in there in the morning and it would be all ready to go. And yeah, it was no augers, so of course it was a lot of manual labor, a lot of love, but you know, it was good. You felt like you were really brewing beer instead of just pushing buttons. So
Yeah, that's true. All right.
because anybody can push buttons.
Anybody.
Anybody can push buttons.
All right. What the sparge is for?
So the sparge rinses off all the sugars out of the grains. It also is meant to denature any enzymes in there, so you don't have over attenuation of your grain. What do they call it? Over conversion of your grain.
What do you mean by attenuation?
Attenuation is actually has to do with yeast, so it's the goddamn, how do I forget attenuation?
It's
like
the
the
efficiency with which the
right.
yeast consumes the.
Yeah, so your attenuation, like, it'll be in a percentile, and that's the amount of sugars that are going to be converted by your yeast. So
Right.
if you have a very high attenuating yeast, you're going to wind up with a drier beer and a lower gravity beer. If you have a lower attenuating yeast, you're going to wind up with a higher gravity beer, like a stout or something like that.
Drier beer. What do you mean by drier beer?
So a drier beer is when all of the sugars are kind of stripped out of it, all those simple sugars are out, and you wind up with a gravity that's close to or even below zero. A lot of people do I.P.A, they do it in a brute style. So they'll actually add a little bit of alpha amylase to overconvert the grains and all the starches so that it'll create more maltodextrins for your yeast to consume, and more dextrose.
All right. And what are you going for today?
Um,
We don't know.
We don't know, because this is a maiden voyage of this guy. We came out pretty high on efficiency for first runnings. I'm hoping that second runnings are still up there too, so we can wind up with a pretty heavy beer. Being an I.P.A, of course, you always usually want to go.
Well, hopefully, if it is a little bit just a little higher, the yeast will do its job, and we'll end up with,
We'll end up with a boozier beer.
something a little stronger than we originally planned for. But it's an IPA, so that's not the end of the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good thing.
You do like to hit your numbers, but if you don't hit your numbers, always have a backup excuse.
That's right.
Oh, well, we meant to do.
So we'll take these numbers from today, and after we kind of figure everything out, it'll give me a good idea of the efficiency of the entire system, and that will allow me to be more accurate with beers in the future.
What kind of things do you eat when you brew?
Chicken leg.
Chicken, apparently. It seems like chicken's the way to go.
That's right.
Yeah.
Chicken.
All right.
We'll now boil that. That is considered your wort before you pitch yeast, and then it becomes beer. So
Wort.
Wort.
Like on your nose?
Is it spelled the same? I think it is.
No, wort is with an A. A nose wort is with an A.
Is it?
Yeah.
I hate English stuff. But anyway, so the grain bed has sat for the first runnings, and we established that when we recirculated. And this one was just to rinse all of the remaining sugars out of the grains, so that we could get a bigger, better beer into this guy. So basically, we are at the last leg. We have to boil for an hour, do our hop additions, and then we'll run it through a chiller and pitch some yeast, clean up, and we'll be good to go.
So talk about how you worked out volume.
So,
Which technically I did, but we'll make you talk about it.
So we have an absorption rate of 8 pounds per gallon. So
Pint per pound.
pint per pound. So given that absorption rate and the amount of grain that we had, we were able to figure out exactly what volume we wanted. And then you always want to go a little bit above. I think we figured for a gallon of loss boil. So we're going to be at about 8.5 gallons volume here, pre-boil. Once we boil, it'll obviously condense down a little bit, and we'll be at the right volume by the time we get there.
Didn't really think about trube. But
Oh.
We'll have a loss for trube, but
Yeah, so we will. We'll have a loss for trube at the bottom. and that's just all the extra proteins and hop fragments just kind of settling down to the bottom. I do have a bazooka filter on the other end, and you always want to go 100% stainless in your kettle. No brass. I know you can use brass outside, but don't use brass inside of your kettle. So with the bazooka filter, it'll actually keep that protein on it, and it'll help filter out all those particles, so we have a nice clean beer going into the fermenter.
A lot of people use aluminum kettles. What are your thoughts on aluminum kettles?
About the worst idea ever. Aluminum not only leaches when put onto huge heat, but you can actually melt aluminum with the amount of heat that we're putting towards this kettle right now. So stainless steel is going to be your best bet. I know there's people who use different alloys and stuff, but really stainless is the way you want to go for any brew.
Good news, you want to buy kegel systems from the now burned down Muddy Creek.
That's right.
By golly. We know where you can get some kegs.
That's right.
For a perfectly reasonable price.
I'll tell you what, now that I know what I'm doing, we'll just cut and bore them all out. We'll just sell whole systems. That's what we'll do.
See? Pro-am.
That's right.
All right.
Hey man, we took a gravity reading of the second runnings and kind of our pre-boil. And they were a little low, so we're going to add a little bit of extra time on the boil. That way we hit numbers. We're not looking so much for extra volume. We do want it to be at least the type of beer that we want it to be when it comes to ABV and all that. So we're going to give it an extra little bit of boil time, let it come up to numbers before we start our additions of hops and get down to it. So, I mean, especially when you're homebrewing, it's kind of up to you. If you have higher numbers, do what you want. If you don't want a boozier beer and you come up a little shorter on your numbers, so be it. It might not matter to you, but maybe you're very particular and you like to hit numbers. That's a good way to kind of bring it down. If you end up overshooting it, you can boil it, bring your numbers back to where you want them, and then continue forward from there. So that's what we're going to do now.
All right.
We are at our second edition now. Just added some good old Amarillo hops. Smells great. So we will finish out our additions. I think we have we have one more boil at 5 minutes, and then we will whirlpool for half an hour. That'll drop temp down to where we can transfer without ruining anything at boiling temperature. It'll also allow us to add some more hops. That'll give it better flavor and aroma rather than bittering. So the longer you boil a hop, the longer it's going to convert into a bittering instead of a flavor or aroma. The more acid, what is it called?
Isomerization.
Oh, thank you. The more acid is isomerized, the more bitter it's going to be instead of flavor and aroma. So we have different additions for different times, so we can round out the beer and get it to a good flavor. And yeah.
So what would you use for hops?
Today we use Columbus and Amarillo. I always usually try and go a high alpha on the back end when I'm bittering. That's just kind of a base rule. You don't have to, but I like to. IPAs are always a lot more bittering. Some of the IPAs nowadays are getting into juicy, so you're getting into more later additions, whirlpool additions, and things like that. This is more of a West Coast style IPA, so it'll be later additions and not as many. We won't have as many whirlpool additions as a juicy or a hazy would be. So.
And what do you expect out of the combination of Columbus and Amarillo in terms of aroma and flavor?
So Amarillo has a very good grapefruit and citrus flavor to it. It has a good pop. And Columbus has a very good kind of back end, almost like a piney, resiny bittering to it. So we put that on the back end for a good solid bittering backbone. And now we're just doing flavor and aroma hops, and Amarillo's good for it. It'll give us a lot of citrusy notes and a lot of grape.
Question now, just so you can get to know Patrick a little better. All right, if you were gonna hook up with the Disney princess, which one would you choose?